Welcome to the Art of Feeling Better, and today it's story time. I'm going to be telling you a lovely tale of a young girl and her adventures through life. So if you are sitting comfortably, then I shall begin. Once upon a time, there was a little girl. And this little girl, like many young girls, grew up in a lovely family, in a lovely little house, in a lovely street, in a lovely village. Everything was nice and calm and quiet. Not much happened to this family. They went through life as families do, with their jobs and their household duties and their roles as parents and daughters and sons and friends, having experiences and learning along the way. Now this young girl, as all young children do, learned her place in life and learned how to behave in a social unit by watching those around her. And she learned how to form attachments with the people around her, with her caregivers, looking for clues and watching for cues on how to behave and how to deal with situations as they arrived. As part of the learning process of life, this little girl adapted and reacted to all of the environmental things around her as they came up and she had her little young girl adventures. She learned how to build relationships with friends. She learned how to navigate school. She learned how to get along with her brother most of the time. And she learned the roles and responsibilities of parents, of caregivers, of family members, of teachers, of friends, and of all of those around her in the community. And she watched quietly, and she learned carefully. Little did she know at the time, something that would become very apparent when she was much, much older, that this young girl had a little bit of a gift. She was very, very highly sensitive and highly attuned to the emotional environment in which she lived. She didn't know at the time that not everybody felt things this strongly. She just assumed that it was the same for everybody. But she felt in the atmosphere, in any space that she was in, what was going on for the people in the room with her. She felt things very strongly when there was anger, when there was sadness, when somebody else was upset or worried. At the same time, she felt deeply when people were excited, happy, overjoyed, and at peace. And this was the tool that this little girl began to use through her life to navigate the ups and downs, the challenges, the highs, the lows, understanding what people weren't saying and taking her cues from the environment and the feelings around her. Now, as life went on and this little girl began to grow up, as all little girls do, some of the experiences began to be a little bit more challenging. After all, that is how we grow up. We learn to deal with different situations. Now, one of the biggest challenges for this little girl was when people's words and actions didn't match up. Because she'd become so good at reading things like body language and energy and atmosphere, it sometimes was really confusing when people said things that didn't match up with what they were projecting out. And this led to a lot of confusion and a difficult time in processing what people actually felt compared to what they actually said. Later in life, it would become really obvious and really apparent why this was happening. And it would also become really obvious and apparent that this gift really was a gift, as long as it was understood and used and harnessed properly. Because if it wasn't, it was likely to lead to a lot of misadventure and some really difficult times. Now, in this perfect, lovely family unit, it was widely understood through the generations that it was good to be seen as being a good family. It was good to be seen as being successful and having all the things that anybody could ever want. It was generally understood that hard work was an important value and we should all strive to just be a little bit more, do a little bit more, and work a little bit harder so that we could prove our value to other people. And the little girl sat back and watched and learned and began to understand how life worked. That simply just being, just existing, just taking up space wasn't enough. And that you really had to do something pretty spectacular to be able to prove yourself worthy. And she watched and she learned as family members went through their life having experiences and challenges without reacting to them at all, like nothing had ever happened. And recognise that it was really important to always make sure you had a smile and always make sure that you were happy and you were content, you weren't argumentative, you didn't display any kind of anger. Everything was just fine. Everything was just normal. Life was wonderful and everything we'd always wanted it to be. There simply were no difficulties. There were no challenges. Everything was just met with strength, resilience, stoicism, and a good old British stiff upper lip. Now, as this young girl started to approach adolescence, with all of the challenges that come along with that, hormones raging, brain all tangled up in knots, not knowing what her true identity was, where she wanted to go in life, what she was going to do, what she was going to be, what other people wanted her to do, and what other people wanted her to be, she found herself in the unfortunate position that her parents had decided it was no longer working out between them, as many parents do, and that they were going to separate. Now, this young girl, with her heightened sense of empathy and her 11-year-old confusion at the world, found herself in a position where her father kindly took her to one side and explained the situation, breezing through as if it were simply just another day, something that we just had to get on with, and it was what it was. As you can imagine, the young girl internally felt this incredibly difficult, but had never learned how to process emotion, had never learned how to express emotion. What she did know was that everything was fine and that there was no need to react. There was no need to be angry or upset. We simply had to smile. We simply had to just get on because that's the way life was lived. Now, at that very moment, little did she know that a snapshot would be taken and imprinted into her little 11-year-old body. A snapshot of great overwhelm, anxiety, stress and fear at what would happen next, who would help her through this journey, and what would become of the family. In an instant, as she locked down those emotions and painted on the smile, she learned that it was important to prove herself worthy more than ever before, and that somehow, somewhere along the line, she must be to blame. Not only that, but her little 11-year-old self was now responsible for bringing the family back together and making sure everybody was safe and everybody was happy. Now, I'm sure you can imagine, for a little 11-year-old girl, that was quite an experience with nobody there to share it with. But what happened as that girl grew through her teenage years and into her 20s, she became strong. She became resilient. She also became an overachiever, a perfectionist, a people pleaser. And she started to display all of the signs of a very unhealthy coping strategy that she had learnt when she was a small child. Now transitioning into adulthood and trying to navigate the future, working out what lit her up, what made her soul sing, what she wanted to do with the rest of her life. These behaviours all came into play as she decided to swallow and bury down those instincts, because she really needed to work out what other people wanted her to be. She really needed to assess the room and assess the behaviours of other people to make sure they were all happy with what she was doing. She remembered that she just needed to work harder. She just needed to do more. She needed to be more. And if she could only keep everybody else happy and satisfied, then maybe, just maybe, one day they would choose her and she would be loved and she would be safe again. Now, as that little girl became a woman, She entered her 20s. It was time to become a mother herself. And she had 4 amazing, beautiful children, determined to raise them with kindness, compassion, with fun, and with the strength that she knew she possessed. She started to look back at her childhood and realised that maybe some of the things that her parents did, some of the things that her parents said, didn't really match up, and that she really wanted to make sure she broke the cycle and didn't start passing some of the more negative things on to her children. So she started to develop her own parenting style with her lovely Prince Charming, who she'd met while she was at school and formed a really strong bond with. Now, of course, her behaviours and her language didn't match up. So this young woman, with her flaming sword and her shield to protect her babies, carried on her mission to work harder, to please everybody, to fix all of the problems so that one day she might be chosen. She might be able to breathe again. She might be able to sit in peace. Now, as this young woman, this mother, began to learn and grow and forge her own path through life, she started to experience some really uncomfortable symptoms within her body. She began to feel pain. She began to feel anxiety. She couldn't work out where it was coming from because her life was so perfect and everything was great, just as it always should be, just as everybody wanted it to be. One day, a young woman, now in her 30s, found herself in the back of an ambulance, on the way to the hospital, terrified that something bad had happened to her, and terrified that she would be leaving her children behind, wishing she could go back and do things differently. Now, the doctors at the hospital were incredible, and they really helped the young woman. And the message that they gave to her was, you need to slow down. You need to stop. You really need to look after yourself. This is a warning sign for you. It's important to take a rest. But that young woman, who had learned her own ways to navigate life, had other ideas. She thought she could defy the doctors. She simply told them there wasn't time to rest. They didn't understand how important it was. She had to achieve things. She had to do things. She had responsibilities. She couldn't let people down. There were things that needed fixing. There were people that needed fixing. So she went home and she had a day's rest. And then she picked up her flaming sword and out she went back into the fray. No lesson learned. Now I'm sure you can imagine what happened. This woman, now tired, exhausted, depleted and in pain, ended up right where they warned her that she would be, back at the hospital. By now, using medication to try and mask the pain so that she could get through her busy, stressful, crazy days. But everything was fine. Just look at that social media. Look at how well business is going. This woman has it all. She's a mother of 4. She's married and loves her husband. She has several businesses. She is winning at life. But of course, as I'm sure you can imagine, the tale doesn't end there. There was only so long this woman could go on behaving in the way that she had been taught to do, before things started to become unravelled and she was forced to do exactly what she'd been told to do. Take a break. And as she finally came to the conclusions that that's what she needed all along, to be able to rest, to be able to choose herself, to be able to work out what it was that she needed and put those things first for once, there began an epic hero's quest of rediscovery, of digging deep and weeding out some of those roots right from the very beginning in that lovely house, in that lovely street, with that lovely family where nothing ever went wrong. And understanding that life is like learning to surf. There are always going to be challenges. There are always going to be highs. There are going to be lows. There are times to feel comfortable, and there are times that you need to feel uncomfortable. She learned that wearing the mask is exhausting. And it was so liberating to be able to move into a different space with an understanding of all the things that she'd experienced and all of the learnings that came from those things, so that she could put into place a new way of life. And it was during this process, this relearning, that she realised that that was her sole purpose. That was the reason she'd experienced everything that she'd experienced. And that was the reason that she had her incredible gift. The ability to understand and empathise with human beings, whatever their background, whatever their story, whatever their experience. The ability to be in a room and to sense the emotions and the feelings of the people there really became a true gift, and one that could be used to help people. But she could only do that when she realised that she had to put down her flaming sword for a moment and pick up her shield. She had to build in her protection and make sure that she had super strong boundaries and the space to be able to ground, to find her own peace, to experience the things that light her up, bring her joy, fill up her fuel tank, so that when the timing is right, she can pick up that flaming sword and she can use her gifts and she can bring her wisdom back to her community and share the things that she's learned. Now that young woman is a slightly older woman with a little more wisdom, a little more peace, and a little more purpose. And who knows where that adventure will take her? Maybe if you stay tuned, you'll find out. I don't know if you caught it, but right, it's me. It's me. It's my story. I thought it might be a bit more fun if I made it a little bit more interesting, like a story. So I hope me sharing some of my experiences might resonate with a few out there and might just inspire you to think a little bit differently and start to look at weeding out some of the things from your own past experiences that might be shaping the way you think, you feel, and you behave. Because you really have that open door, that blank piece of paper that you can start to rewrite your story with, but you really can't do it until you have reflected and you've wound back to what's made you who you are today. And if some of those things are not serving you and that are providing harmful and toxic things in your life, what better time than to weed them out and get rid of them so that you can get onto that hero's quest and really live your true soul purpose. That's why we're all here. So my job as the suburban shaman is to do this work, to do the shadow work, to do the deep, uncomfortable stuff in my own life, and to bring out some tools and to learn from other people and to work with other people, to share their stories and experiences, and to create this space where we have a set of tools and a set of wisdom from around the world for how people have been through their journey and supported themselves into feeling better. Because what way to change the world than by each person playing their part in sharing something to help the next? It's literally how we do it. Now, in case you're wondering, there's some characters in that story, backstories for those characters I'll be bringing you at certain points. So there's 4 lovely children and I have 4 lovely adults, and I have them lined up as guest speakers at some point. So I'd really love you to meet my wolf pack, my kids, my husband. They all have stories to share and we all have stories that we share together. So I'm hoping that in itself will be some interesting conversations that we can bring to you as a family. And I'd really like to have those deep, rich conversations with the kids around my experiences and how I began to parent in their early years and some of the things that they learned and picked up on through my parenting style, and how we've now started to have some conversations around, exactly what I just shared with you, why I do some of the things that I do, which bits are good, which bits are gifts, which bits not so good. And that's how we shift the cycles again, and that's how we create future parents who do things differently again, rather than carrying on the same patterns. It's all about communication and finding ways to manage the feelings, feel some feelings when they come up when you're having this kind of communication. So you'll meet those very soon. And you'll also meet some of the other characters, which I haven't gone into detail and mentioned, but some characters that I've met along the way, particularly over the last 10 years. Literally like side quest plot twists, some incredible, amazing people from all over the world. And I just know I've met them because I need to bring their stories and their wisdom out to you. So, and it's time. We all know that. We all know the world's in an incredible pivot point at the moment, and we're kind of got this tipping point and this sort of imbalance that's started to shift back into something else and new ways of living and new ways of communities working together. So my bit to play, my small part to play, is to do this exact work, to create the spaces and the tools and the frameworks to be able to explore and bring out some of these things that we kept hidden. We keep the mask on, we just put our highlights out on the socials and no one will ever know that we're an imposter, when actually we're all doing the same thing. And if we can just get to the point where we can share that and live authentically, then it just makes everything so much different, and every single person then gets to feel better. And that's what this is all about, right? Trying to support people in the art of feeling better. Now, my plan each time I do a session, and especially each time I have a special guest with us, is to ask some specific questions so that we can build our toolkit together. And one question that I'm going to ask everybody from their perspective is, how can we change the world? We know it's shit. We know the systems are broken. We know it doesn't work to try and fight the system. But we also know that collectively we have a lot of power. It's what we do with that power that makes a difference. So how can we, as little tiny people with no influence, change the world? Well, I'm going to answer my questions first. So my opinion on this one is, we can all find our purpose, our identity, our passion, what lights our soul up, and we can live that truth. When we do that and we align everything up, we then start to play our very small part in the great changes that need to be made. And the more people that we can light the touch papers for that start to do the same thing, the more we collectively build that power. And if we're all working towards the same goal, which is happy, harmonious, peaceful, joyful lives where everybody is valued and respected, and who doesn't want that? Then all those tiny little fireflies that are all lit up will all be marching to the same tune. And that is how you change the world. That is why I do Mindset Mojo. And that is why you have this podcast, so that I can play my part in creating that change. Literally being the change that you want to see in the world. My next question is one piece of advice that will help people feel better. Now, I have some incredible friends that I'm going to be bringing in who will have some really great takeaway tools and really great pieces of advice for you. My advice to you today, and it's something that I resisted for so long. Remember the girl in the story who just refused to take any advice because she was too busy and she knew better? I was told this so many times and I flat out refused. So I recognise that out there's many of you that will be thinking the same. But I hope that you will take this little bit of wisdom just from an expert by experience. And that is the power of the pause. That's what I like to call it in my workshops, the power of the pause. How incredibly powerful it is to take a small pause, to assess, to reflect, to ground, bring yourself back in the room and to fill your tank up. Even if you can have just sort of magic moments in the day, small little 5-minute mindful moments, small pauses, but it's so powerful it will change your life. Now I'm getting used to it, and it's behaviours that are ingrained. Anybody that says they've completed life on expert level and just do as they say is lying. So I'm on this journey right there with you, and I constantly have to remind myself, and I have a good team around me, good network of people that remind me as well, which is great, which is what I need. But you have to pause, you have to, and especially, and listen to this, I'll say it louder for those in the back, especially when you start to feel uncomfortable and under pressure. That's the moment you have a choice to make. And most of the time we want to work harder, faster and more because we get into that trauma drive, that nervous system response. That's the moment when you recognise those feelings. That's the pause. That's when you put the brakes on. It's when you just stop. Even if it's a small pause, it will make all the difference because you will make some different decisions. So the power of the pause, when you can possibly activate that power of the pause, the better. My advice. And then I am going to ask every single person that I speak to their favourite feel-good song, because we're going to do playlists. So I'm going to get a Spotify playlist on the go, The Art of Feeling Better. I'm going to get everybody to add their favourite tunes in. So we've all got a really cool feel-good playlist built by the community for the community. So I'm starting this bad boy off, and my favourite tune is actually one that my husband I already knew the song, like, it's a famous one. But my husband kept playing it whenever we were having a difficult time and everything was just like really strained and really tough, because he's the rock, he's the one that grounds everything in. And he kept playing it. And then we started playing it when we were all kind of collectively doing the housework, the jobs that no one wants to do and everyone's dead aggy about and angry about. It's like this song just was like, everyone's just getting on, doing it and happy, because you cannot help but feel happy when this song is on. So my suggestion is Jackie Wilson, Higher and Higher. And it'll either just make you feel really good or it'll just remind you of Ghostbusters. Either way is good. So we'll get that on and have a bit of a bop next time you're feeling a little bit low. So there you go. I'm going to sign out now for this particular session, and you can join me next time for the next episode of The Art of Feeling Better.